Hello. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the special International Tibet Support Groups meeting. Let us now invite the speakers for the inaugural ceremony on the dais. Please welcome Dr. Nan Kishore Trikarji, National Convener for Tibet Core Group for Tibetan Cause India. Please welcome Kalu Dukicheong of Department of Information and International Relations. May I now request all of you to welcome Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay of Central Tibetan Administration. Thank you. It is indeed a great privilege and honor for me to welcome all of you to this special International Tibet Support Groups meeting, convened by the Core Group for Tibetan Cause India and facilitated by Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration. The meeting has great significance in view of the urgent and critical situation inside Tibet, and as well as a symbolic statement of solidarity for the new Tibetan leadership. So far, we have held 6 International Tibet Support Group conferences and 1 special meeting. The first international conference was held in Dharamshala in the year 1990 with delegates from 25 countries, and the last one at Suraj Kund, Delhi with 258 delegates of support clearly shows the widespread support for the Tibet movement. A special mention should be made of the increasing participation of our Chinese brothers and sisters in the non-violent movement of the Tibetan people. This eloquently reconfirms that the worldwide Tibet movement is not anti-China or anti-Chinese people. Friends, you have undertaken a very long and arduous journey from your country to come up to Dharamshala. I heartily welcome all of you again. Before we commence the formal inaugural session, I would like to request all of you to rise and observe a minute of silence for all the Tibetans who have sacrificed their life for Tibet, and in particular, for those who have self-immolated. Let us also dedicate this meeting in their memory. Please. Thank you. Please take your seat. We are now opening this ceremony with a welcome address from Dr. Nand Kishore Trikaji, National Convener for Core Group for Tibetan Cause India.
A very good morning, Kashidalek, and Namaskar. Honorable Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay, Kalan Diki Chong, Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile, the Deputy Speaker, the Chief Justice, the other high dignitaries of the Tibetan administration, and all the friends present here for this special meeting of the International Tibet Support Groups. I heartily welcome you all to this second such special meeting, which has been convened by the Core Group for Tibetan Cause India and is facilitated by the Department of Information and International Relations, Tibetan Government in Exile. You have come to these cool heights and rugged terrain of Dharamshala from as many as, I think, more than three dozen countries from all over the world and all the continents, braving many hardships and inconvenience in solidarity with the cause of Tibet in a most uncompromising manner in which your commitment is shown by this large presence of the Tibetan groups. We all stand for a just cause of Tibet, and that's why we are prepared to suffer. This I consider to be the cause, the Tibetan cause, I consider to be the cause of the entire humanity, and so one that concerns all of us. Friends, we also have amongst us today someone who led a group of determined Indians to the Indo-Tibetan border of Tawang. They were able to sneak into the land of Tibet and managed to scoop the holy soil of Tibet and have brought it here, and they will be presenting it tomorrow to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This is Mr. Indiresh Kumarji, who will also be speaking to us in the course of the day today. While welcoming you here, let me confess that we may not be able to make your stay comfortable as we wish it to be. But there is no dearth of warmth in our hearts and the concern for it. So the organizers have tried to do whatever they can to make your stay comfortable, but still you may find many things missing, and we all pray and request your forgiveness. Still, they will leave no effort to make the comfortable as possible. Friends, we meet here under the shadow of one of the grimmest situations in the history of Tibet and of the mankind, when as many as more than 17 Tibetans, mostly youth, have had to make the supreme sacrifice with self-immolation, an extremely horrifying method of laying down one's life, which cannot happen unless one is forced by the most desperate situation. Tibetans are going through horrible and boisterous times to gain liberty. But as Thomas Jefferson said, liberty is a boisterous sea. Timid men prefer to calm. But the Tibetans would not. And as we can see, Tibetans are not timids who would accept subjugation forever. Mahatma Gandhi said that nations are born of travail and suffering. Therefore, with all the sufferings that Tibetans are enduring, they are going to emerge sooner than later as a free nation once again. With the continuing repression, the spirit and determination of the Tibetans to be free will ever get stronger and refuse to die. To quote Gandhiji again, freedom's battles are not fought without paying heavy prices, and Tibetans are paying it. Friends, we still hope that the international community will move and move soon enough. The horrendous scenario that we see in the happenings of Tibet should have roused the collective conscience of the governments and the people of the world. Unfortunately, it seems it was not to be. While a little stir exemplified by the Arab Spring has led to the overthrow of some deeply entrenched despotic and undemocratic regimes, the continued acts of the most brutal and tyrannical repression on the Tibetan plateau do not seem to be enough to prick the hearts and the minds of the governments around the world, who swear by upholding human rights, the rights of self-determination, and protection of cultures of all communities, and has not moved them into some visible action. But we still hope that they will. But that will be possible if we make it happen. For that, perhaps, we, the Tibetan supporters, need to do more and much more effectively and with telling results. To put our heads together and come out with a renewed set of vigorous campaigning and actions is, to my mind, the purpose of this 3-day special meeting. It must, however, be acknowledged that a lot is being done by the support groups. A great upsurge of awareness about the Tibetan question and the sympathy for their cause has been generated due to their sustained efforts. In India, the organizations constituting the core group today has more than 400 chapters spread all over the country. They have been carrying out scores of programs throughout the year. The support among intellectuals, politicians across the political spectrum, retired diplomats, teachers, lawyers, college and university professors, besides general public, has grown tremendously. We have a large number of supporters among parliamentarians belonging to all parties barring the hardcore pro-Chinese fringe of communists. The All-Party Indian Parliamentary Forum for Tibet now has a former Foreign Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, as its convener from the main opposition party, and Mrs. Chandresh Kumari from the ruling party as one of the co-conveners. Happily for us, she has now been promoted to the rank of a cabinet minister in the government of India. We have a number of other sympathizers and very active sympathizers of them in the Union cabinet. I need not name them, but we Indian supporters know it. So whenever the question of Tibet would come before the cabinet, we are assured of the support of a large number of the ministers there. And that is the result of the sustained efforts that have been made by the Tibetan administration, by the leadership of, under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and whatever little the Tibet support groups in India could do. There are 6 other co-conveners who belong to different political parties, and we are assured of a support in the parliament itself whenever the question comes. And from time to time, there has been a greater display of greater confidence amongst Indian parliaments to raise the question of Tibet. Of late, there have been debates on this question, and our members have been active, have played their part more effectively. As I said, Mr. Sinha, who has now become the convener of the All-Party Indian Parliamentary Forum, has written a letter to all members of Parliament in which he says that the Forum has decided that India must now take a leading role in the international arena on the question of survival of Tibetan identity. He has also said that it is our moral responsibility to rectify our past mistakes in the handling of Tibetan issue. The Government of India and the parliamentarians of India must join the world leaders and the world community to voice their concern over human rights violations and religious repression in Tibet. Friends, I would also like to share a secret with you here. As a journalist, I tell you on good authority that the devolution of political authority on the younger leadership by His Holiness the Dalai Lama has sent a sense of deep concern down the spine of the Chinese leaders. They are wary and are probing in the dark as to what course the Tibetan movement might take under the new leadership. So firmness on the part of the younger leadership and continued campaigning by supporters and the Tibetans themselves is what is needed for the success of the Tibetan movement. In the end, I must tell the new Chinese leadership that they must know that truth is simple and easy. Falsehood is dubious. It could be the cause of, and I repeat, it could be the cause of China's own destruction, as we have seen elsewhere in the world. With these words, I welcome you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chika. I would like to request everyone present here to kindly turn off their cell phones. Don't keep it on silent mode, just switch it off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nand Kishore Trikaji, for the wonderful speech and for joining us despite your busy schedule. We are and always will be grateful to the Indian government and the community for their continued support. Now, I would like to request Kalu Digichayang of Department of Information and International Relations to address the August gathering.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first start by thanking all of you for traveling so far on such short notice. We sent out the invitation only about 4 months ago, which is relatively very short notice for a meeting of this magnitude. As I mentioned last night, the CTA is very pleased to facilitate this gathering of Tibet Support Groups in Dharamsala. The last meeting that took place of that nature dates back to over 20 years ago. The last international TSG meeting took place in 2011, and there's been some very important developments since then. Notably, of course, the wave of self-immolations inside Tibet, the transfer of political power from His Holiness to the elected leader of our community, Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay, and the name change from Kalon Tiba to Sikyong. To that effect, I know that some of you may already know, but I'd like to say a few words about this name change, which is very important. For those of you who follow the parliamentary session, you will know that during the last parliamentary session in September, it was voted unanimously to amend our charter so that the term Kalon Tiba would be replaced by Sikyong. To give you a little bit of a background on the usage of the term Sikyong, it's not a newly coined term. It's a term, along with the term of Kashak, that was introduced during the 7th Dalai Lama. And the title holder carries final authority on all political matters. This name change was very important to ensure both historical continuity and the legitimacy of the traditional leadership from the 5th Dalai Lama. When Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay was sworn in August of 2011, His Holiness mentioned that when he was young, he was handed over Sikyong, political leadership, from his elderly regent, Tagda Rinpoche, and that on that day, he was handing over Sikyong in turn to young Lobsang Sangay. So this change of title completes the process of the transfer of political authority to an elected leader. Sikyong is now answerable to the people, and he is fully empowered as the political head of the Tibetan community. So this is a very important terminology change, and I thought today I would take a few minutes to explain that to you so that for those of you who may have questions as to why the change in term took place. I would also like to say that in this very important leadership transition period in our community, it is very important to give maximum visibility to Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay, who is the democratically elected political head of the Tibetan people, but also the political successor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If I were to elaborate and also say a few words about the 14th Kashak, the 14th Kashak is composed of members of individuals who have served our community for several years in one capacity or another. We are as committed to open and frank discussion and heated debate as we are to teamwork, as I'm sure can be attested by the staff of the Secretariat, the Gasha Secretariat, who probably overhears our heated debates through the walls. So I want to take this opportunity to say that as we share this commitment, we also share a very deep conviction that at this hour it is primordial for the Tibetan community and the members of the Kashak to stand firmly behind our elected leader, which we are committed to. He is the right person at the right time, and we must send an unquestionable message to the international community and to Tibetans inside Tibet that the leadership transfer from His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the elected leadership is going smoothly as it is. I would also like, on a personal note, since my colleagues are here today, to extend a personal thank you for very patiently over this past year, in our first year of our administration, very patiently answering my endless stream of questions as somebody new to the inner workings of the Central Tibetan Administration. To carry on about today's meeting, as several of you may have noticed, this new administration is very engaged, very directly engaged in international outreach. We realize, however, that if the issue of Tibet has survived, continues to remain in the heart and mind of the international community, it is thanks to international grassroots support and individuals like you who work through Tibet Support Groups to keep the issue alive in your respective countries and communities. As we reach out internationally, we're also very committed to lending whatever support we can to the Tibet Support Groups within the parameters of the CTA's, the administration's policies. Through our offices of Tibet, there are 12 of them who come under the aegis of the department that I head, we monitor, we keep a pulse on how the Tibet Support Groups are doing throughout the world, and how we can lend a support and cooperate to facilitate their work. Today, I take this opportunity to draw your attention to a few observations. Like any political movement, we face challenges dealing with sustainability, efficiency, effectiveness. So today, the comments that I will share with you speak to these issues. Today's event, the inauguration ceremony, is also being webcast through Tibet Online, so I know that we have a very large viewership within the Tibetan community, both in Europe and North America, so I hope that this message is also heard by members of the Tibetan community who will view this ceremony. Any political movement is like a marathon. At moments we have to do a sprint, but overall it's like a marathon. We don't know if we have to keep the marathon for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. Some of you who are here today have been engaged with the Tibetan movement for decades. Some of you are new. The issue of sustainability is a very important question that we need to address. It's not only an important question for Tibet support groups, but even as a community. The decision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to transfer political authority now speaks to that issue. While he is in good health, while there are several members of the elder generation who are still around, I firmly believe that sustainability of our governance structure was an important factor that was taken into consideration when he made this historical decision. So as Tibet support groups, we need to ask ourselves the same question: how do we ensure the sustainability of the work that we're doing for Tibet? Even though you're deeply committed, how do we ensure that we draw from different segments of the population, draw from a younger generation, carry on membership drives to ensure that the work that you're doing now goes beyond the direct involvement of a few individuals, but can go on through time as long as it's needed? In terms of efficiency, this type of gathering is about that. It's about pooling or sharing resources and knowledge. It's also taking into account regional realities, the composition, the environment of the different TSGs varies from country to country, and we're fully aware of that. Where certain countries have limited membership, others have very broad-based grassroots support. We invite, particularly countries where there are several TSGs with limited membership, to strongly make an effort to work together and to collaborate together for key initiatives. In terms of effectiveness, we have obviously been quite effective since for the past decades, half century, the issue of Tibet is still alive. I think it speaks to the effectiveness of what we've done so far. Yet at the same time, we must be very careful not to become complacent and constantly try to renew our approach and adapt to changing environments. And in that sense, I urge you during the next few days to speak about how you can carry your work through, of course, political channels, but what are also other channels, whether it's cultural, educational, academic, religious, environmental. And also, as the environment changes, to not hesitate to convene roundtable discussions with representatives of different stakeholder groups, different target groups, to brainstorm about what are some new initiatives, new ideas, same goal, but new ways of doing things that reflect new technology, approach to outreach to a younger generation. The effectiveness of lobbying is very important. The reason, for example, in Europe and North America, this lends particularly well to those environments where governments and parliamentarians respond to grassroots appeals. And we're hoping that today, as we meet over the next few days, two key items on the agenda are lobbying and rallying. So lobbying speaks to how can we be effective as individuals by coordinating our effort. Of course, we're also aware that lobbying is not necessarily the most feasible avenue in all the different countries that are represented here. This is particularly so, of course, in countries like South Africa, neighboring countries to China. We realize that certain things that we can do in North America and Europe may be more difficult in those environments. And there again, I invite people who are from those places to adapt initiatives to their local environment. One other issue also that we feel very strongly about is the Tibetan involvement in the work of the Tibet Support Groups. Any representative of the new administration, whenever traveling abroad, encourages the local Tibetan community to work in partnership with local TSGs. And this commitment is also reflected by the fact that in the participants for this conference, we have our 12 representative, Office of Tibet representative as participants. This is an effort on our part to facilitate the bridge building between the TSG's work and the Tibetan communities. The members of the administration will continue to visit Tibetan communities over the next few years, and we will continue to send out this message without any interruption that how important it is for Tibetans to engage and lobby and rally and work in partnership with local Tibet support groups. So today, since we're focusing on the local Tibet support groups, I thought it was very important to share that with you very clearly. Another topic that I wish to address is Chinese outreach. I know that you can all appreciate the importance of Chinese outreach. We have amongst the participants of this conference over 20 members of the Chinese community, so we're very pleased that they could join us. The reality with Chinese outreach and Chinese outlook on the issue of Tibet is that the Chinese government, with its extensive propaganda machine, has been quite successful in very much playing on nationalist sentiments of the Chinese community when it comes to the issue of Tibet, and also depicting through misinformation the issue of Tibet as being an inter-ethnic conflict. There is, as some reporters stated in newspapers, a deafening silence from the Chinese community with regards to the current events inside Tibet. But I refuse to believe that it's because they are unmoved by the plight of Tibetans. I think that there is a malaise, and a malaise that's been fed by the Chinese propaganda machine, that when speaking up for Tibet equals disloyalty to China, to one's country. So our challenge over the next few years is to gradually tear down this notion and replace it with the truth, which is that the interests of Tibet and China are not mutually exclusive, and that it's not a zero-sum game, and that friends of China do not need to choose between China and Tibet, nor do members of the Chinese community when speaking up for the aspirations of the Tibetan people inside Tibet. So over the next few days, we'll be talking about rally and lobby work. I encourage you to, as much as possible, develop a concrete plan, whether it's regional or national. We're fully aware that within the limited time, it's impossible to come up with a detailed plan, but perhaps a concrete outline and a tentative calendar with the details to be developed over the next few days. Some of our work is also not so much coming up with new initiatives, but just improving our coordination, like the UN lobby work for the different human rights council sessions that take place several times a year. I think that in a movement like ours that has spanned several decades and ongoing, it's very important that we celebrate also our victories. While what we see unfolding in Tibet is very unfortunate, I think that it's also important to recognize that it's a reflection of an unwavering determination by Tibetans to ensure that their aspirations are heard by the international community, not only heard, but realized. So on that note, I wish you a good 2 days of discussion, and I thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Kalu Diki Chiangla, for the wonderful speech and speaking on the important information on leadership and name change. Thank you also for speaking on the coordination between the TSGs and the Central Tibetan Administration. I would like to request Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay to release the Book of Messages to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, published by Bureau of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Delhi. Thank you. May I now request Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay of Central Tibetan Administration to deliver the keynote address. Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay is the first democratically elected and the political successor to His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
With due respect to our most revered leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Honorable Chief Justice Commissioner, Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, colleagues of the Kashas, and chairmen of different commissions, members of the Parliament, and friends from the media and the public, and especially to the participants from all over the world. On behalf of the Central Tibetan Administration, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for coming all the way to be with us today here in Dharamsala. Because this Tibet Support Group meeting is extremely important during this tragic phase of Tibet's history. Given the unfolding crisis inside Tibet, they all are looking at us as to what we might do for Tibet and Tibetan people. In that sense, this TSG meeting is historic and extremely significant, in the sense we are sending a clear message to Beijing that friends of Tibet are here to show their support, solidarity, and also plan events to make sure that the issue of Tibet will remain alive, not just alive, will be stronger and stronger till the day comes. Tibetans will regain their freedom, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama will return to Tibet. Also, we send a message through this meeting to Tibetans inside Tibet. They are the ones who are suffering. They are the ones on a daily basis endure imprisonment, torture, denial of any basic human rights. But they are doing all they can and more by giving up their lives with the hope and belief that exiled Tibetans and their friends will stand up with them. Even if they get tortured, even if they die, their lives will not go in vain because their friends outside will stand up for them. Their friends outside will make known their aspirations. All over the world, and the international community will rally around the cause. And even though they will leave this world, but their children and the children will see the day of freedom in Tibet and His Holiness the Dalai Lama to his rightful place. In that sense, this special meeting gives them hope. And hope is one thing that keeps human life, keeps the movement alive. Because if you look at the history or the current situation inside Tibet, it might look dark and gloomy, but it's the hope. They all are clinging on, and with this conference, we are sending a clear message to them. And also to the international community, because you have come from different countries, that the message is, we want the international community to focus on the issue of Tibet and now. Yes, democracy has swept the Eastern European countries. Yes, freedom is sweeping Arab countries. Yes, Aung San Suu Kyi is released and walking around freely. It's time for Tibet. It's time for His Holiness the Dalai Lama also to return to Tibet. So your message to the international community is also not just that they have to speak out and show sympathy and to some extent support, but the message is we need the international community now. That is the message. In that sense, even though the political leadership and the responsibility is handed over to the new generation, but you all are saying, even though the leadership and the responsibilities might have changed, but we are the friends of Tibet. We will continue with this movement. We will march with the new leadership. We will give the same support and more to make sure that Tibetans inside Tibet deserve basic freedom and rights that you all enjoy in your own independent countries. I'm sad to inform you that 2 more Tibetans have self-immolated, including a woman. Now it's 74 Tibetans. We had one in 2009, no self-immolation in 2010, but from March 16 on, in 2011, we had less than 2 dozen. The majority of self-immolation have taken place this year. In October alone, there were 10 self-immolation, and 7 in 7 days. In November, we're just midway through, 12 self-immolations, and 5 in 5 days. That speaks of the gravity of situation inside Tibet and the urgency of the crisis of Tibet. I know self-immolation has been a difficult issue for all of us, not just for our friends, but also for Tibetans. In Kasha, we debated a lot, and finally, we came out with our stand. Because when I first went to the US and European countries, a lot of probing questions from the other side, very influential people. We know self-immolation is happening inside Tibet. What is your stand? You have to make it clear. Morally, philosophically, politically. And this is our stand. As a human being, you don't want to see anyone die like that. And it's a natural reaction for a human being to say, please, don't die like that. That's why Central Tibetan administration have made repeated appeals to Tibetans inside Tibet not to resort to drastic actions, including self-immolations. But it persists. Even yesterday. Now what do you do? Is the next question. And as a Buddhist or people of any faith, when someone dies, what do? You pray for the dead. That's why Tibetan administration has organized many, many prayers for those who have died. And we will have one on Sunday where you all are invited to participate as well. Because that's what you do as a person of faith or no faith. When someone passes away, you pay respect. We have done that. Now, as a Tibetan, what do you do? As a Tibetan, you show solidarity because they are dying for Tibet and Tibetan people. And as a Tibetan, you support their aspirations. The aspirations being the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet and freedom for Tibetan people. To support Tibetans inside Tibet is our sacred duty. They are the ones who are suffering. They are the ones who will tell us what to do. Once they tell us, we have no option but to support them, support their aspirations. This I appeal to our friends as well. Yes, we have issues. Yes, there are debates. Yes, it's a complicated issue. But we should not focus simply on the action. We have to focus on the causes, why it's happening. So we should blame where blame should be. Beijing's hardline policies. Why Tibetans and Tibetans are giving up their lives? Occupation of Tibet, political repression, economic marginalization, environmental destruction, cultural assimilation, denial of religious freedom, and so on. These are the causes. And Tibetans and our friends are expected to rise and say why Tibetans are dying, why Tibetans are self-immolating. It's a complex issue, but the causes we know. And point out to the causes and say these are the causes that forces Tibetans to self-immolate. And we have no choice but to support the aspirations of Tibetan people. So yes, we should debate. We can debate on the action. But absolutely, we must point out and stand up and say, these are the causes. And wholeheartedly stand up and say, we support the aspirations of the Tibetan people. If we, as Tibetans and friends, don't stand up for aspirations of Tibetan people, then I think we are not fulfilling our responsibilities. Now, the Chinese government blame us. They say it's a terrorist act. Someone outside China is instigating it. Absolutely baseless. 74 self-immolators. Not even a single one of them has harmed even a single Chinese person, or a Chinese restaurant, or a Chinese hotel, or a Chinese house. How can it be a terrorist act? Yes, Tibetans are harming themselves. But even at that painful phase, when one is burning, they are not looking at Chinese, or they are not running towards Chinese, but they're dying a painful death by themselves. Now, if the Chinese government insists, we have already issued a statement. The Chinese government and the international community can come to Dharamsala, check our files, see for themselves if there's any connection. There is no connection, there is no instigation. The blame and the solution lies solely with the Chinese government. Because these people who are dying are of what we call socialist paradise generation. When the Red Army first moved to Tibet, they promised socialist paradise for Tibetans. But there is no socialism or paradise. Rather, there is occupation and repression. Now 74 Tibetans, and how many more have to die before the world speaks out, before the Chinese government realize that they ought to address this issue. So that is why it's all the more important that after this meeting, wherever we go, we come out without any hesitation to support the aspirations of the Tibetan people. As I said, when I first went to DC and European countries, questions were asked. After we made our stand very clear and wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, making it very clear where we stand and explaining the causes of the self-immolation and aspiration self-immolation, the leaders around the world have started speaking out more forcefully. In that sense, we welcome the UN Human Rights High Commissioner's Navi Pillai's statement on the issue of Tibet, and the US Ambassador Gary Logg's visit to Tibet and his statement, and statements from around the world, making it clear that repression is the reason why there are self-immolations. And there is a problem in Tibet which ought to be addressed. So that when the world leaders, including the United Nations, is speaking out on Tibet, it's all the more important we, the Tibetans and our friends, speak out more loudly, rally more forcefully, so that these Tibetans will realize their aspirations. Now, we know the 18th-party Congress just concluded, and it will have direct ramification on the issue of Tibet. But it's too soon to conclude as to which direction the new leadership will go. But presently, the top 7 leaders, just an update, you all know this, we know Xi Jinping, Li Keqiang, Wang Qishan, Zhang Dejiang, Zhang Gaoli, Liu Yunshan, and Yu Zhengshen. That's 7 leaders. And then the person relevant to us is Yu Zhengshen. He is reportedly going to head the National People Political Consultative Conference, because so far Tibet has been handled by the United Front. United Front is accountable to the National People Political Consultative Conference, and thereby to the Standing Committee of Politburo, of which Xi Jinping is the president, or is the chairman. So we know Yu Zhengsheng is the person who will have a major say on the issue of Tibet. His background is that he has been the party secretary of Shanghai. Also, his family is reportedly close to Deng Xiaoping and his friends with Deng Xiaoping's son. That much we know. And Xi Jinping, we all know, his father, Xi Zhongshun, in 1954, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama visited China, Xi Zhongshun was responsible in receiving His Holiness the Dalai Lama and also traveled around a bit. And particularly late Panchen Lama had very close relationship with Xi Zhongshun. And we all know about Chinese leaders like Hu Yaobang and Tao Ziyang, given their liberal background. But one aspect of Xi Zhongshun is interesting in the sense he was with Hu Yaobang till the end. So Xi Jinping's father supported Hu Yaobang, the most liberal leader, Chinese leader, in recent years, till the end. So that's the father's legacy. But we don't know how Xi Jinping, the son, will be. Because when I was in Rome, I asked some of the parliamentarians, because Rome has a long history of many leaders, I said whether the son will behave like the father or not is to be seen. So it's too early. So, but we do have the people now, Xi Jinping and Yu Zhengsheng, and the person who is head of the United Front is Ling Qiuhua. His background is interesting. He was an equivalent to cabinet secretary to Hu Jintao. So he was essentially the right-hand man of Hu Jintao. But now he reportedly for some issue being demoted or promoted, he is the head of the United Front. So we have one person who's from Hu Jintao, and Yu Zhengsheng, given his connection with Deng Xiaoping, could be considered as connected to the princeling faction, and Xi Jinping in the princeling. Generally, of the 7 leaders, reportedly 5 are from the princeling faction, Xi Jinping, Jiang Zemin, and 2 are from Hu Jintao side. But then if you look at the age, most of them are in 64, 65, in the mid-60s. So they are more conservative-leaning group. So how much to expect from them is to be seen. So it's pretty clear among the top 7, we don't have even a single Tibetan, not at all, never has been, not even a single quote-unquote minority. Now if you look at the top 25 as well, that's the Politburo of the Chinese leadership, not even a single quote-unquote minority. There used to be a Hui minority among the top 25 in the 17th Party Congress, but not this time. And then if you go further down in the Central Committee of 225 or so people, there are 39 members from minorities, but only 10 permanent members. 29 are alternate members, means 10 have a say in the Central Committee. But then, compared to the 17th Party Congress, the minorities' representation in the Central Committee has decreased. It used to be 16 permanent members, now it's reduced to 10. So if you go by percentage, from 7.6% representation, it has been reduced to 4.87%. So if you go by the population, 1.3 billion Chinese, 1.3 billion in China, 100 or so minorities, of which there should be around 8% representation, even at the Central Committee level. Now it's been reduced to less than 5. So in that sense, the representation at the top, at the Central Committee level, has been reduced. In that sense, the say is marginalized. But then on, now whether this new leadership will have new perspective on the issue of Tibet, will review the policies of Tibet, it's too soon to say. But in months to come, we might get some hints, and then we might know what will happen, and accordingly we have to formulate our own thinking. But generally, on the issue of Tibet, wherever we go, we make this argument, and it's for your consideration to all our friends. What we say is that Tibet is not a constitutional challenge for China, nor an institutional challenge for China, or nor an issue of political will. Because when you talk to Chinese, they often say it's so complicated, and they give you so many reasons. And why we say it's not an institutional, constitutional, or political will. Number one, when the Chinese government wants to solve an issue, they always find a way. Constitutionally, as far as Hong Kong is concerned, or Macau is concerned, the one country, two system, Article 31 of the Constitution of China was included to address special administrative regions like Hong Kong and Macau. In the Chinese Constitution, there is no concept called one country, two system. But it's the Article 31 which says that a special administrative region can be established. Based on that article, one country, two system for Hong Kong was given, one country, two system for Macau was given. Now, when you make this argument, they say, well, Hong Kong and Tibet are two different things. Hong Kong already had a legal system, a commercial system. The Chinese government is simply consolidating or recognizing the status quo. If that was the case, what about Macau? Macau, according to many reports, was a crime-infested island. Even criminals from China fled to Macau. Why was one country, two system given to Macau? Now, it's not a constitutional problem because Article 31 is there for one country, two system. Now, if you go by the Memorandum of Genuine Autonomy for Tibetans, we have clearly laid out, based on Article 4 of the Chinese Constitution and Article 12 of the Minority Nationality Act of 1984 and many of the provisions of the Minority Nationality Act. And there is a hint of Article 31, but generally it's Article 4 and Article 12. So it's not a constitutional problem for China. There's a process, there's a provision in place to address the issue. Now, it is also not an institutional problem, because when Chinese government wants to solve the issue, they create a separate institutional mechanism, like one country, two system for Hong Kong, one country, two system for Macau, and special economic zones as well. So they have created different institutions to address different situations. And it's also not an issue of political will, because the Chinese government is on record saying that we are willing to address the issue of Taiwan. Some say one China, two concept, or two interpretation, the different models. But the Chinese government has already created a cabinet-level committee to address the issue of Taiwan. They are willing to engage, and they are engaging in and willing to address. Of course, there are different views in Taiwan. So, when it's not a constitutional challenge, institutional challenge, or lack of political will, why the issue of Tibet is not addressed even today? This raises a disturbing question. Is it because Tibetans are not Chinese? When Chinese government can address Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, or special economic zones, all these are, from the Chinese government point of view, are Chinese. Hence, they're willing to address. Meaning there is underlying trust, so to speak. But when it comes to Tibetans, even though there is constitutional provision, institutional mechanism, why they are not addressing it? I think it's the message. You are Tibetans, or you are not Chinese. That's why we are not addressing it. That's why the article Kalin Digichoyang referred to in New York Times raises a disturbing question. There are many liberal-minded Chinese scholars inside China and outside. They're discussing all aspects of the 18-Party Congress and issues inside China. But somehow, even in the internet and social network, the issue of Tibet is not much discussed, even by liberal-minded Chinese. Is there a systemic bias against Tibetans? Is there a psychological bias against Tibetans? It raises a disturbing question. In that sense, we appreciate our Chinese friends in this room and around the world who speak out about Tibet. On this basis, we say Tibet is a litmus test for China and the world. And I wrote a piece in Wall Street Journal yesterday, and we'll be distributing it. There we make the argument, if you really want to see a moderation of China, if the Chinese government really wants to practice the peaceful rise as the foreign policy and harmony as the domestic policy, they must address the issue of Tibet and bring peace in Tibet and bring harmony in Tibet. Then only we will believe that China is really rising peacefully and there is harmony inside China. This is also a test for the international community. Tibet is a test. Because we have invested in democracy and nonviolence for so many decades. For the last 50 years, every election of the parliament or the Khalun Tribunal Sikyong have been democratic. Even though we are a refugee community, we have practiced democracy, we have consolidated democracy. We can compare with any democratic country in the world as far as democracy practice and processes are concerned. Now, we have invested in, we say democracy and nonviolence are two uncompromising principles. We will not compromise. Now, if the international community does not support us, we will continue to march on with democracy and nonviolence, but it will reflect their stand and their principle. On the one hand, we all agree democracy, universality, freedom has to be applauded and supported. Everybody says that. Nonviolence has to be supported. On the other hand, when there is someone like Tibetans who actually practice it, if the international community don't support us, it's a statement of their stand as to what they say and what they actually do. Now we see violence around the world. International community rush to put out the fire. They send tanks, they send helicopters. But then it's too little too late. Had they supported nonviolence and democracy to begin with, the potential for future violence around the world will be diluted and lessened. In that sense, Tibet is a test for the whole world. If the international community does not support Tibet, it will be a statement that democracy and nonviolence are not worth supporting. Then there are other marginalized groups, refugee groups and ethnic groups around the world who are watching and will say, you know what, we should not invest in democracy and nonviolence because look at Tibetans. They've been practicing this for 5 decades and they're not getting the support. Why should we? And there will be ethnic conflicts around the world and violence around the world. In that sense, Tibet is a test both for China and the rest of the world. With that, I want to conclude by saying 2013 will be very important because internationally, if you look at the political scenario, US election or the presidential election just concluded. That dominated the news in 2012. 18th Party Congress of China also dominated the news. It has just concluded. European financial crisis dominated the news mainly in Europe. Now it's also getting less and less. Syria dominated the international news for some time. It might be they have to find some solution, hopefully. In that sense, now at international level, I think we have to make efforts. With all these major issues being addressed one way or the other, we have to make efforts to make Tibet one of the major issues in the international forum. So in that sense, 2013 2013 is a rare opportunity for Tibetans and our friends. And we can make this a historic year by mobilizing and galvanizing all our friends around the world through rallies. Not simply a rally of 100 and 200 people, but major rallies. By lobbying the parliaments, not just lobbying few of them, but intensifying lobbying. Not just once a year, but 2-3 times a year. Thereby we can have debates generated in different parliaments. A possible resolution passed by different parliaments. So that the message to China, to Tibet inside Tibet, is that yes, leadership in Dharamsala has changed, but friends of Tibet are with Tibetans. Yes, Tibetans in Tibet are sacrificing their lives, but their lives will not go in vain, because in 2013, we'll intensify our efforts and make realize the aspirations of Tibetan people, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama return to Tibet and Tibetan people regain their freedom. This, I believe, will happen, mainly because the spirit of the Tibetan people has never been stronger, has never been as strong as we have today. The solidarity of Tibetans inside and outside has never been this strong in recent history. This as our foundation, Tibetan spirit and Tibetan solidarity, and the unity Tibetans are showing. This, I think, is the moment when Tibetans and friends around the world should build on the momentum and make realize the aspirations of Tibetan people and make Tibet the one of the best and the most beautiful stories of the 21st century. I do believe this will happen. And with your help, with your support, we all will make it happen. When that day comes, we will make another history. And that history will be because of your support and the sacrifices of Tibetans inside Tibet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sikyong Dr Lobsang Sangay, for the inspirational speech. I'm sure that the delegates will seriously take your words in this 2.5-day meeting and discussion. Thank you, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. With this, we come to the end of the formal inaugural ceremony. Thank you.